I'm Jenn de la Vega.
And I'm Clara Park.
And welcome to The Cinema Chefs, the podcast for people who love to cook, watch movies, and cook what they see in movies. Today, we are going to talk about Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. I love that we tried to wait for each other. That's great. Some spoilers ahead if you haven't seen the movie, and if you're going to watch it, I want to issue a content warning for some child abuse, poverty porn, and fat shaming.
What is the one-sentence summary of the movie? For the first time ever, the world's greatest and most reclusive chocolatier decides to open his factory for a tour for 5 lucky people who have discovered the golden ticket in one of his delicious chocolate bars. The original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory came out in 1971, directed by Mel Stewart, written by Roald Dahl, Robert Kaufman, and David Seltzer, and starring Gene Wilder, Jack Albertson, and Peter Ostrom.
There were 2 more remakes, one in 2005 with Johnny Depp as Wonka, and directed by Tim Burton, and a very different take came out in 2023 with Timothée Chalamet in the titular role, and directed by Paul King. I did not watch either of those. Clara, do you have a favorite Willy Wonka?
So I have watched all 3, and no question, Gene Wilder. I think he nailed the creative genius mentality who really just wanted to make the best chocolate ever and make people happy. He wasn't motivated by anything other than a pure love of chocolate. We're going to surprise our listeners today because the show is not about chocolate. That's way too obvious.
Yes. Today we are going to discuss multi-course menus. Specifically, we are looking at the magical 3-course dinner Gum, Chewed by Violet Beuregard. At 1 hour and 10 minutes, it's the most amazing, fabulous, sensational gum in the whole world. This little piece of gum is a 3-course dinner. Bull. This is the dad that says bull. And Wonka says, no, roast beef. But I haven't got it quite right yet. And Violet continues, it's tomato soup. It's hot and creamy. I can actually feel it running down my throat. It sure is great soup. 2nd course is coming up. Roast beef and a baked potato. And her dad says, with sour cream? What's for dessert, baby? Blueberry pie and cream. It's the most marvelous blueberry pie I've ever tasted. And he says, holy Toledo, what's happening to your face? And Wonka says, it always goes wrong when it comes to dessert. And the best line of the scene, Mr. Beauregard moans,
I got a blueberry for a daughter.
He sounds like a parrot. I feel like that's maybe a voice that he's known for or something.
Probably.
Probably.
A lot of information in this scene. At face value, it's a simple 3-course dinner, as mentioned. Soup, protein and starch, then dessert. I think this is typical of many American dinners. People always throw around the phrase meat and potatoes to signify less than adventurous diner. Another popular variant is to have salad as your first course, but the mechanics of that would have been way more difficult for Willy Wonka and his Oompa Loompas to engineer, right?
Yeah.
But in the real world, soup or salad is a very popular first course option.
Yeah, for sure. I think in more contemporary upscale restaurants, there are more options for a first course, including crudo or a raw course.
Love crudo as a first course. You're easing into your meal with a cool and refreshing preparation, usually with clean proteins, acid, and some balance from olive oil or other rich ingredient. For the Italians, the meal begins with antipasti, or before pasta course.
And that's followed by primi, which is usually a pasta course, then secondi, which is typically protein, a chicken, steak, or fish, and dolci, or desserts. Some people opt for dessert right after the pasta course, which is also okay. There are no hard and fast rules anymore, but we're kind of outlining a traditional way to eat.
When I cooked in France, we followed a strict 4-course dinner. Appetizer, entree, cheese course with a small salad, then dessert. I really enjoyed this way of eating because I love cheese. There are hundreds of varieties of cheese in France. The cheese aisle in a French grocery store is 10 times the size of what you'd find in an American grocery store, an absolute heaven. It's a vital part of the meal. In restaurants in France and French restaurants in America, you may see a cheese cart or even cheese cave. Jen, what is your favorite way to end the meal? Sweet dessert or savory cheese?
Oh, cheese always. I'm not much of a sweets person. I almost always will share the dessert because I would never finish one on my own. What about you, Clara?
Depends on the day, but I usually opt for dessert because I want a sweet ending.
That's awesome. Is there a set menu style in Korea?
Not per se. You sit down at the table and order your food. The server brings out banchan, or the little assorted side dishes, which always feature some type of kimchi, vegetables, maybe a little salad, grilled fish, marinated seafood. There is no rule for how many banchan or what they are, but kimchi always makes an appearance. After that, they bring out what you order for your main course, kalbi, seafood stew, etc. This is also the time you usually get your steamed rice. At home, everything is brought to the table at the same time, which is why I said it's not like a true coursed out meal. Jen, what's the coursing for a typical Filipino meal?
All at once. It's family style, with rice, several proteins, a soup, a fish, a vegetable, and fruit to finish. Actually, the fruit is ever present on the kitchen table, especially during chismes, or that's what we call gossip. If we had rice for a previous meal, it was either reheated or fried with chopped up leftovers. Any thoughts on tasting menus, Clara?
Wait, first I want to know about this chismes. Is this
Yes.
a traditional part of the meal?
It's a part of Filipino culture. It's like the afternoon lull where everyone's just sitting around. And so we start to peel fruit and sit around the dinner table and just gossip. A lot of catching up, a lot of talking about who got into what college, who's pregnant, who's getting married, who do we think is getting engaged, that kind of stuff.
I love this so much, and I want to do chismes.
Yes.
Fruit optional. This just sounds like a really great way to spend time with your community.
It's a lot of fun.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so thoughts on tasting menus, which are obviously more formalized course dinners. I think a great tasting menu really takes the diner on a culinary journey. When I worked in Napa, we offered 5 and 9 course tasting menus, which changed seasonally. In New York, we had a 10-course menu that changed all the time. It's a great way for the chefs to take advantage of local and seasonal ingredients.
What were the courses?
In Napa, it was crudo, appetizer, pasta, protein, dessert. For 9 course, it was crudo, appetizer, pasta, foie gras, poultry, meat, cheese, intermezzo, then dessert. In New York, they threw in an egg course, which is super old school, and an amuse-bouche.
Oh my gosh. Wait, I love that foie gras had its own freaking course.
We had hot and cold preparations. So you could have, for the cold preparations, it was terrine, torchon, mousse.
Yes.
You got a little trio. And then the other side of the table would get seared foie gras.
Wait, intermezzo. I don't see that very often on menus. Could you explain what that is?
Intermezzo is like, I think in Italian it means in the middle or among the middle. It's usually a palate cleanser. And in restaurants where I've worked, the intermezzo is usually palate cleanser, something to ease you from like savory courses into sweet courses. Sorbet is a popular palate cleanser, intermezzo. I think it's pretty fancy. I don't see a lot of restaurants do it anymore, but it really is taking care of the diner, right? On their culinary journey, it's like you've had all this rich, wonderful food and meat and savory, salty, umami bombs. And to get this really light sorbet, a grapefruit sorbet or a peach sorbet, or in New York, we did an Arnold Palmer sorbet. That was pretty good.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was a really good one. I think also because it's cold, it's also very different from presumably a lot of hot courses before it.
Right.
So it's a gustatory, psychological, temperature, flavor reset.
Oh, yeah.
Before
Certainly.
before you go into typically your dessert.
I was at Alinea.
Ooh,
And
fancy.
they called it a transition course. They didn't call it intermezzo. They called it a transition. And it was an in-between. It had one foot in the savory and had one foot in the sweet. So it was roasted carrot. I don't remember exactly what the bottom was. I think it might have been a sorbet or if it was panna cotta. I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But it kind of served that same purpose of easing you into the dessert because there were going to be 3 more desserts after that.
Amazing. And I think that's really smart because even though carrot is a vegetable, it's got such a high sugar content.
Yeah.
It's like nature's candy. Like carrot cake is actually my favorite cake.
Very nice.
Yeah.
But these tasting menus, that's a lot of food.
It really is. I can't eat that much anymore.
Me neither.
So let's go over some terms and techniques from the original movie scene.
Yes.
She specifically says tomato soup, warm and creamy, but it's not a tomato bisque. What would you say is the difference between a soup and a bisque? Bisques are typically made with cream. A lot of times you see seafood bisques, so like lobster bisque, crab bisque. It's a richer, fattier, heavier soup. And I feel like tomato soup, there might be a dairy component, but I don't think it's
Not necessarily.
a bunch of heavy cream. Right. It tends to be lighter. I'll take tomato bisque over tomato soup any day of the week, twice on Sundays. Lobster bisque 4 times on Sundays.
Love it.
And then roast beef versus prime rib. I'd say the difference is the cut of beef.
Yeah, the roast beef tends to be on the round side or a bottom round. Prime rib is very specific, and it has a lot of fat compared to the roast beef.
Yeah, so it's much better cut of meat. It's much fattier, much more flavorful. I think with roast beef, with the rounds, bottom round, top round, eye round, all those things, it's a less expensive cut of beef, and they tend to be tougher.
Yeah.
So I think with a lot of roast beef recipes, it's kind of like a slow and low. You really like love the meat.
Mm-hmm. But in the context of the movie, this sounds very luxurious to all the people who are in the room.
For sure. Because, I mean, I think something that we discussed before we started recording was this movie came out in the early 70s. And, you know, most of America was not living high on the hog. So I think the opportunity to go to this chocolate factory, and I think that was a prize too, like unlimited chocolate or something like that. You've got this amazing experience. But I think at one point, I think Grandpa Joe was like, unlimited chocolate? Because they're so poor and they're all sleeping in that same bed. And just a lifetime of chocolate is so enticing to him. So this meal, which may not seem fancy to us, was very fancy at the time to the average viewer. And I think that that's something that, I mean, even now, it's like, I don't know, what would be the analog like for today? Like, Jen, this chewing gum is a luxurious 9-course meal. I feel like it's the same exact thing.
Yeah, it's a skirt steak with chimichurri. It's Duchess potatoes, you know, fondant potatoes, you know, whatever's trending on TikTok.
Yeah. It's a caviar amuse-bouche.
Yeah, it's caviar. We have a seared foie gras. But to provide some context, earlier in the movie, the only meal that we see Charlie's family eat is cabbage soup, and he is sick of it. And it's his first paycheck, so he pulls out this giant loaf of bread. I actually got very excited at that giant loaf of bread. It looked very hearty.
I mean, congratulations to the food stylist. That loaf of bread was the best loaf of bread
gorge. Yes.
Ever seen. It was just a different time. I mean, Jen and I are older, sophisticated ladies, but we were not born when this movie came out.
Yes.
But if you were to do that scene now, something as pedestrian and humble as a loaf of bread would not be the big reveal.
No, it would be a sourdough. It would be... It would be a She-Wolf Bakery sourdough, 3-day fermentation.
Artisanal
loaf.
Ancient grains.
It's got to have a crackle. You got to hear it crackling as it cools. That's what I think would be.
Hand-milled flour.
Yeah.
Hand-churned, grass-fed butter. Fleur de sel, finishing salt.
Yeah. So if we were to ever direct Willy Wonka in a 4th remake, we would do that. Okay, the next part of the dish was a baked potato. What is the best way to make a baked potato?
Honestly, I'm old school. Wrap it up in foil, put it in a hot oven for like an hour.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing to do. Other people wash them, and so they're still a little wet, and they rub salt on the outside. Ooh. So it's salt crusted. That's pretty fancy.
Very fancy.
I actually tested out Martha Stewart's method last week because I knew we were going to record this episode. She does Yukon Gold potatoes on the rack, no preparation, at a lower temperature at 325 for an hour and a half. That is a hell of a long time to wait for a potato.
Too long.
That's too long. However, when you take it out, you drop the potato onto the cutting board a few times to break it up. Most people, when they get a baked potato, will just squish in the sides, You cut a slit in the top and you squish in the sides so that the insides kind of pop out. If you do the Martha thing and drop it from a height, the top and the bottom, you flip it over, drop it again, the inside is super fluffy. It's crazy.
That sounds amazing. I'm gonna try it.
It's a lot of work though, I gotta say. Hour and a half for a potato, I don't know.
But it's not active cooking time. You set it and forget it,
True.
Put them in the oven, watch like 1 or 2 episodes of your favorite show. Ooh, hour and a half, a movie. You can watch a movie.
True. Clara, are all potatoes created equal?
Nope. Freshness matters. I visited Boise, not Boise, Idaho.
That's how we say it?
Yeah, Boise, Idaho.
Boise, okay.
A long time ago, I did a dinner with my old boss at the home of a very wealthy patron for the Sun Valley Idaho Art Festival. Anyway, we flew into Boise, and it was like a 3-hour drive to Sun Valley, but we had to stop and eat somewhere. And it's Idaho, right? It's like potato country. So
Yes.
on the menu, it was like loaded baked potato, when in Rome. So I was like, I'll have the potato. And the server looked at me and she's like, have you ever had an Idaho potato? I go, yeah, of course. And she's like, have you ever had a fresh Idaho potato? I was
Whoa.
like, no. Jen. Angels sang when I ate this potato. It is like eating a potato for the first time. It's so not moist, but it's just so flavorful, and like the texture and the way that it eats, it's unbelievable. And if you think about it, I asked them why it was so good, and she's like, it probably got dug out of the ground like a couple days ago.
That's where they come from.
That's where they come from. It hasn't dried out. It hasn't been beaten to death in a truck.
Yeah.
It hasn't been dehydrated in an airplane. And the analogy that I tell people, so sadly, our listeners need to know, most of the produce that you're eating is probably from really far away if it's not in season. Apples from South Africa, a lot of stuff from Israel, Chile, Mexico, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
I think people don't think about, why is that so bad? But think about how you feel if you've been on a long plane ride.
Yes. Ooh, that is great.
That is how your produce feels. So you're dehydrated, you've been in this metal box. And mind you, we travel much better in a plane than produce does. And your fruit is also sad. And I feel like another example of just, freshness matters. In Oxnard, California, they have the Strawberry Festival.
Yes.
And freshly picked, sun-kissed, warm strawberries that have never seen refrigeration. A pastry chef friend of mine and I went, and we bit into these strawberries. We both took a bite. Our eyes got huge. And I think we both each inhaled a pint of strawberries like in 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. We bought a whole flat, and then we drove back down to LA, and we put them in the refrigerator because that's what you do. Not as good the next day.
Wow.
The refrigeration, it's sucking out the moisture. It's not the best that it can be. When I was in France, the salad for the cheese course, literally I'd go outside with a metal bowl and a paring knife, cut a head of butter lettuce, go inside, wash it.
That's so cool.
Right. And one of the young gentlemen that I worked with, he was like a cheeseburger, Chinese food, tacos kind of guy. His favorite thing to eat was salad. So
Aww.
Every night at midnight, he would go downstairs to sneak salad.
That's amazing.
And I said, Brian, I hear you sneak salad in the middle of the night. He goes, I do. And he just looked at me and he goes, it doesn't taste like this in America.
It's true. It's true.
It's not organic to be organic. That's just how they did it. Mm-hmm. It's sunshine, water, a really nice dirt that's been there forever.
Yeah.
And they just kind of left it alone. And it was a beautiful farm, beautiful garden. And I remember asking the Frenchman that I worked with, what do you guys do to the garden? Like, what kind of fertilizer do you use? Like, everything's so good. They're like, nothing. They're like, we just let nature do its course.
I think what I want our listeners to take away from this is questioning your local food systems. Look at where your food is coming from. Make better choices. The things that are from closer to home are going to taste better than from farther away.
100%. I went to a seminar and someone said, if you spend $1 locally, it brings like $5 back in your community.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, but it makes sense, right? But people always say, cost is an issue, and that's true. But local in-season produce should be affordable. People buy a lot of exotic stuff out of season.
Yeah.
And it costs a fortune.
Clara, what is the best topping for a baked potato?
Butter, sour cream, bacon, and cheese.
Yeah, I like that combination. I like to add the tiny chives, tiny, nicely chopped chives.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah, so, I guess essentially all of them, right?
Yeah, everything. Everything on there.
Loaded baked potato for both of us.
I did have creme fraiche last week, and I did a herb butter. It was very nice, especially with this pillowy, fluffy texture from the Martha Stewart technique.
That
Love
sounds
it.
amazing.
Yes, it was very good.
All right, meat and potatoes. What is the best potato preparation to have with meat? Baked, boiled, steamed, fried, twice fried, mashed, scalloped, au gratin, etc.?
Oof. That's tough. I guess it depends on which meat it is and how that meat is prepared. Because I don't really like to double up on methods. I don't want a fried meat with a fried potato.
Very smart.
Unless it's wings. Unless it's fried chicken wings.
Yes. Fried chicken wings, fried chicken, you can have with fried anything.
Yeah, but I like contrast. So if
Yeah.
I've roasted a meat, I think I want a twice fried or a mashed potato.
That sounds very good. I think I'm sort of classic, old-fashioned, I guess. If I have a strip steak, I want a baked potato. I think if I have a sliced, like we were talking about, what did you say earlier?
Yeah, skirt steak and chimichurri.
Yeah, skirt steak chimichurri, which is a lighter preparation with like a really acidic but delicious sauce. I want mashed potatoes. I actually do that a lot. Some variant, flank, hanger, skirt, steak with chimichurri. I pretty much always serve with mashed potatoes.
Interesting.
That is a go-to. But I think for my favorite though, I don't think you can beat a good au gratin.
I don't eat it very often, but I do love it when other people make it for me. I don't make it myself for some reason.
It's a pain.
I tend to roast my potatoes, like breakfast potatoes. But my secret that I learned from my first restaurant that I worked with, we do 2 kinds of mustard. We do Dijon and grainy, toss the potatoes in that, and roast it off with olive oil and garlic.
That sounds amazing.
It is so good. Because it mellows out the mustard flavor as it roasts. And mustard goes with a lot of stuff, goes with a lot of meats.
Yes, if we think back to episode 1 and we discussed all the different mustards for the Cubano. Look at us building on
Lore.
topics and
Building
skills.
lore.
I think, though, we also mentioned in that first episode, and it harkens back to what you're saying right now, chefs love mustard. How many kinds of mustard do you have in your fridge right now?
4.
Me too. Why do I have 2 containers of Dijon mustard? One's in a squeeze bottle, one's in a pie container. Very different. Hello.
Hey, mustard brands. Hey, mustard brands, sponsor our podcast. Our final course in Violet's chewing journey is the blueberry pie.
Blueberry pie. Wild versus farmed blueberries. What do you think?
Wild's always going to taste better, but am I going to pay for it every time? No.
Agreed. And how do you make your filling? Do you use cornstarch, tapioca, flour?
Depends on which one I have around, but I tend to go for the tapioca. Because I like that hand pie thickness feeling in my pies. Tends to be more dense.
Agreed. What kind of tapioca do you use as a thickener for your pie filling?
Sometimes I use the baby tapiocas because they just dissolve over time.
That's amazing. So I think the best pie shop that I ever went to was a place called Magpie in Philadelphia. And they got quick cooking tapioca pearls, the small ones, like you said. They ground them into a powder.
Ah, yes.
And that's what they would use as filling. And whenever I do a fruit pie, that is also what I use. What I like about tapioca, as you said, it's nice and thick and viscous. And I think when you cut into pie, you want it to be sort of thick and oozy. I don't think you want it to be watery and thin.
I don't like it when it's watery, yeah.
But I think also another bonus point for using tapioca is that it's clear. I think sometimes when you use cornstarch and flour, it's kind of cloudy. And to me, that's not what I want in a pie filling. It should be clear, it should be thick, it should be glossy. And I think quick cooking instant tapioca ground into a powder, I think does that the best.
Yeah, sometimes if you use flour, you can taste it, which I don't prefer.
The flavor of the flour is not getting cooked out when you're baking it.
Needs to be toasted beforehand if you do that.
That is a wonderful tip to toast the flour if you're going to use it in your pie.
Yes.
Have any tricks for the flakiest crust possible?
Yes, the coldest butter. When you portion your butter, you can cube it and then stick those cubes in the freezer while you work with the rest of your ingredients. While you're measuring your dry ingredients, you can also chill. You can also chill your pie tools. You can chill the bowl in the fridge. You can chill your pastry cutter in the fridge as well. Because if you keep the butter cold, it will not melt before you bake it. When the butter melts as you bake it, that's what creates those layers in the pastry. So you want to keep everything as cold as possible before you bake it.
Absolutely. I agree. Butter always. Do you ever use Crisco, other shortening, or lard?
I have not. I've tried it maybe once or twice at work, like testing recipes, but I am not fully practiced with either of those.
I think a lot of older cookbooks, and I love pie. I mean, strawberry rhubarb pie, I think, is the greatest thing ever. Blueberry pie is also a close second. I think a lot of people like to use Crisco and lard and shortening because they think that it is flakier. And I don't know the science of it, but I would bet that it's just easier to get similar results from ice cold butter. So I feel like if you handle the butter properly, the results are just as good as Crisco large shortening. I don't want to eat Crisco. It's just not a clean fat. It's not great for you.
Prefer the lard over Crisco. A lot of my friends are not meat eaters, so I understand.
Do you use unsalted or salted butter for your crusts?
It depends on what I'm doing. So I will use unsalted most of the time. Like if a recipe calls for a pinch of salt in the filling recipe, then yeah, I'll go unsalted. But I'll use salted if I know the filling is going to be uber sweet. So if it's going to be like pecan pie or like a peanut butter or a chocolate, like something that's super sweet that needs a salt balance, or like a chocolate chess pie, I would go for a salted crust.
That's good. I don't really buy salted butter ever. I feel like I always buy unsalted butter. When I cook and bake, it's pretty much always unsalted butter. And then to your point, I'll tweak it. I'll add as much salt as I want to or need to.
Yeah. It's great to default to unsalted butter because you can always add more salt. It's just that you can't undo it if you use salted butter. So tip for y'all out there.
100%.
When you're buying butter, make sure you read if it's unsalted or salted so that you can make your adjustments.
But I think also salted butter tastes better. This is a fact. You know, if you eat a lot of toast with butter, which I do, you could say that I could buy salted butter. But I don't know. I just think it gets confusing. I just want one butter in my house, but if you use a lot of butter at breakfast, you should get salted butter.
Yeah, I am a multi-butter household.
Jen, you are so fancy with your multiple
so
butters.
Fancy. All right, to finish off Violet's meal, she has blueberry pie and cream as opposed to pie and ice cream a la mode. How do you feel about this?
Having watched all three movies, they change it. In the original 1971, it's pie and cream. And then in the latter one with what is that woman's name? She played young Carrie Bradshaw in the Carrie Diaries. Anna Sophia Robb is Violet Beauregard in the new Tim Burton version. And she says pie and ice cream. I thought that was an interesting modernization of a meal that stayed pretty consistent. I've seen people do that where they pour cream on pie, which is so indulgent. And talking about the viscosity, I don't want heavy cream on my pie. I want a nice thick scoop of ice cream. Or I want heavily whipped cream.
Yeah.
So that's light and airy, coats the mouth better.
I don't like too much.
No, not too much. At Wimbledon, that's the traditional strawberries and cream, which, again, why would you want to drink straight cream? But
this is foreign to me, but I'll try it once.
We are both foreigners. Fun fact, we are not British citizens.
Nope, we're not.
We do not understand strawberries and cream at Wimbledon.
Well, Clara, what is your ultimate version of a course meal?
I think for the meal in the movie...
Like you're chewing a gum, what are the things that are coming up?
Okay, so I have two answers. I have, what's my version of this meal? Obviously the tomato bisque, as we discussed earlier, prime rib, mashed potato, strawberry rhubarb pie, cinnamon ice cream.
Ooh.
But I don't know that I have like an ultimate course meal. I will say this. If I were to die tomorrow, I would have cheeseburger and french fries, grilled ribeye steak, loaded baked potato, handmade tagliatelle with shaved truffles.
Ooh, I like that.
Panzanella salad, oysters, a lot of cheese.
Yeah, a lot of cheese. It's a pretty complex gum there.
I don't think the Oompa Loompas would be up to making my multi-course gum.
I don't think so.
And what about you? What is your ultimate meal?
This is gonna sound unreasonable, but cheese course, fruit, a meat, either a skirt steak or duck confit. We got a salad. And I like blue cheese in my salad.
Yes, blue cheese and salad.
And then a different cheese. And then maybe another different cheese. Because on a cheese tasting, you want to have at least 4. You want to have a fresh, you want to have an aged, you want to have a blue, a goat, or a sheep. You know, so I want the cheese to be interspersed. And no bread. I don't eat bread or crackers with my cheese unless I'm really hungry or there's nothing else to eat with it. I much prefer fruit. Unless the bread is phenomenal. Like, I love a cultured butter and I love compound butter. But yeah, so if I were chewing the gum, it would be like, Cheese. Oh, fruit. More cheese. I would be so annoying because I would just be saying cheese every 5 seconds.
What is your favorite store-bought butter?
I'm Kerrygold pilled, very Kerrygold pilled. But if I go to a specialty shop, which I often do, I stop in every cheese shop I ever walk by. Every time. I don't necessarily buy anything, but I always walk into every cheese shop. I'll get beurre de Barat. I'll get the basket, cultured salted butter from France. It is incredible.
So for our listeners, French butter is better. This is not an opinion. This is a statement of fact. French butter is better. They have this butter that it's not just salted, but it's got salt crystals in it. And I think a lot of times it's from Brittany. So it's Sel de Guérande. That's the one that I think I smuggled 5 pounds of that butter coming back from France because this butter it's like tasting butter for the first time. But it's a wonderful flavor. It's creamy. There's a savoriness to it. But I think for me, I just love the tactile sensation of those crystals. Now I want French butter.
I mean, France has grades of French butter. You know, they're really serious about it. There's sel, demi-sel. There's like only partially salted, different milks, different regions.
But the French butter, even the cheap French supermarket butter, is better than the butter that we have here. And I think it also has to do with the dairy that they use for their butter because the cows are probably treated a lot better. We were talking about sourcing, where your food comes from. People don't think about it, but how the animals are treated will affect the dairy that comes out of it, the meat that they produce. How do you feel if someone is kept you trapped in a cage eating the same thing over and over again, or traps you in the darkness? Like, that does not feel good, and it's psychologically damaging. And especially for more intelligent animals like pigs, they get depressed, they get upset. Stress hormones are a thing that basically ruins the meat. And so these are all things that we should think about and being conscientious about our choices, our selections, the purveyors that we're supporting.
Yes. Listeners, where is the best course dinner you've ever had? I've been to Per Se, Blue Hill, at Stone Barns, Alinea, Savoy, Tellier de Jolie Robuchon, 11 Madison Park. All of these dinners were around 12 to 15 courses and took up to 4 hours. I cannot physically do that anymore. I've paid hundreds of dollars and you feel like uncomfortably stuffed. My all-time favorite course dinner right now is Tempura Matsui. It is an omakase tempura restaurant. It is so relaxing and lovely. You get namuz, you get sashimi, chawanmushi, which is the egg course in this case, a rice dish, and dessert. What about you, Clara? What has your course dinner journey been like?
So I think we can explain. Can you explain to our listeners what chawanmushi is?
Chawanmushi is a Japanese steamed egg dish, and it typically has a seafood at the bottom, like a little treat.
Very delicious. I think for me, my best meals, we did a 9-course dinner at Red, where I worked in Napa. RIP, it's now closed. We did a graduation dinner at the early days of 11 Madison Park, pre-Daniel Hume. And then I also really enjoyed the omakase at Ogawa in Philly. Jen mentioned omakase and I mentioned omakase. So the literal translation in Japanese is, I leave it up to you. In traditional omakase, you don't know what's coming. It's a great way to have a coursed out meal as well, but there aren't hard and fast rules, except maybe that the hand rolls come at the end.
Yeah, or like an egg sushi at the end.
I think typically it goes lighter to heavier, raw to cooked, and then dessert is at the end. But there aren't any specific dishes in a specific order the way that other coursed out meals have been described, particularly European ones.
You already mentioned a great place for pie, and it was Magpie, right?
The best pie shop ever. Sadly, it closed a few years ago.
No!
You know, we got to shout out that strawberry rhubarb pie with crumble topping again. And then I also love Pies and Thighs in Brooklyn.
Nice. I love that you mentioned a Brooklyn one.
Where do you like for pie, Jen?
My favorite, all-time favorite, Steve's Key Lime Pie in Red Hook. You really can't go wrong. He only serves one pie. He also does minis if you ever wanted to get 100 minis for a wedding like I do often. It's pretty fun. And if you go by the shop, you can get a chocolate-dipped 4-inch key lime pie on a stick.
I want a chocolate-dipped 4-inch key lime pie.
Right? We also have 4 and 20 Blackbirds and Petey's Pie. Those are both in Park Slope. And if you are curious about making pie at home, I recommend 2 books, 50 Pies, 50 States by Stacey May and Fong friend of the podcast, and an upcoming galette cookbook with Rebecca Ferkser. Galettes are more freeform pies. You don't need a tin to make them, and it's much more flexible. Clara, do you have any tips for hosting coursed out meals?
I do have some tips for hosting coursed out meals, but I also want to give a shout out. If you're at an old bookstore or a used bookstore and you see the Magpie cookbook, get it. It is wonderful. My tips for coursed out meals are pretty straightforward, but they pack a punch. Anything you can make ahead, please do it. I like to have salads or cold appetizers that can be made ahead so that when guests arrive, I can just bring it to the table. Having a main course that is a braised meat or casserole that can be kept warm in the oven or stove is also a great idea. Finally, a dessert that you can have ready to go is also ideal. I serve a lot of tarts, chocolate mousse, crumbles. You can do all the prep ahead of time. One really great tip I learned from Barbara Kafka is to set the table the night before.
Ooh.
I worked with Barbara Kafka. I learned about cookbooks and recipe developing and testing from her. I think she wrote like 16 cookbooks,
Whoa.
like no exaggeration. Yeah, she's the goat. She's a very fancy Upper East Side lady, and whenever she was going to have a dinner party, she would set the table the night before. And I was like, "Why do you do this?" And she's like, "So I don't have to think about it the next day." And that just stuck with me. If I'm having one person over for dinner or 5 people over, I set the table the night before. And before I learned how to do this, you're in the kitchen, you're moving around all this stuff, and then people start coming in and you're like, I haven't set the table. It's just one less thing to think about. I think it's such a brilliant kind of life hack.
That's awesome.
How about you, Jen?
Preparing dinner for other people, it's like prepping for Thanksgiving. You know, lots of appetizers can be flash frozen well ahead of time or baked and fried when you need them. Cheese can sit at room temperature for an hour before serving. So we talked a lot about cheese. You can pre-plate your cheese board an hour before people arrive. Unfortunately, charcuterie needs to be refrigerated until you plate it. So just keep that in mind. And I like to be extra and have a little something that people can take home with them, like homemade condiments or flavored salts in tiny jars. 11 Madison Park does this with granola, so they'll send you home with a little jar of granola.
I love that you do that. And I think that that's pretty popular in fine dining restaurants in New York. When we ate at Boulé, I think I got sent home with a lemon tea cake. Ooh. When I was at Gary Danko, we got sent home with blueberry lemon muffins.
Oh, that's cool.
And I love the idea of a little take-home gift when you finish your meal.
So shines a good podcast in a weary world. You know what I was thinking? Violet could have just stopped chewing.
Maybe the takeaway lesson from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory is don't chew a piece of gum when you're in a chocolate factory. Tune in next time as we explore the many ways to minimize food waste in The Platform.
Thank you for tuning in to The Cinema Chefs. Please share your tips and tricks with our Instagram at The Cinema Chefs or drop us a line at thecinemachefs@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed the show. This is Jen.
And Clara, signing off.
Just remember, you can become a better cook just by watching a movie. The Cinema Chefs was recorded in Brooklyn, New York and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Edited by Jen De La Vega. Music by Penguin Music, Paradise Island from Pixabay. Logo by Nikki Newsom.